Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. In today's video I will be making an epoxy resin snail with googly eyes using materials from Resin, and as a bonus I will also be showing you how I made my mushroom solar lamp so that my snail had somewhere to sit in the garden. If that sounds like fun, stay tuned and enjoy the video. Here is the snail mould from Resin, and it was a lot bigger than I expected. And yeah, I couldn't wait to get started with it. Now the thing is, I really wanted it to have some proper eyes. You know, like when I did my frogs, if you saw that video, I used some eyes which I had. And I wanted to do the same this time. But I knew it was going to be a little tricky, but that doesn't stop me. I had a plan. I decided to cut some copper wire, and this is 1mm copper wire, and just stick the eye on the end with some UV resin. I didn't know if it would work, but you've got to try, haven't you? So let's have a look. I just put a spot of UV resin onto the eye. Now these eyes are 3mm eyes. I'm not sure where I got them from. I've got quite a collection of them, but I'm sure you can find some if you do a search for 3mm glass eyes. Anyway, once the drop of UV resin was on the eye, I put the wire into position and then pulled the lamp over the top and cured it for 2 minutes. So after 2 minutes, I had an eye on the end of the wire, all ready to be pushed down the tentacle part of the mould. We will see if it holds. I was a bit nervous about it, but I do get these ideas and yeah. The problem is I was worried that if it all went wrong, you know, the whole snail would be wasted. But then I thought, no, because it'll just give it character if one eye's poking in the wrong direction. So that was my theory anyway. So what I'm doing here is just adding a little bit more just to make sure it's nice and strong. And the UV resin, by the way, is from Resin. Right, the next step is to get the eyes into the mould, and it's one of those things where you're not really going to be able to see much, but I'll just have to explain what I'm doing. So what I did was I added about a drop of UV resin into the tentacle part of the mould so that it could go right down to the bottom, and made sure I moved it around a little bit to make sure it was properly coated right in the area where the eye would be. And then I got the eye and popped it down that part of the mould which you can't see. I do apologise. Sorry you can't see what I'm doing. You'll have to use your imagination, I'm afraid. But yeah, I pushed it right down there and gave it a move around to make sure it was completely coated in the UV resin. And you can see through the mould as well. So I did have a look through the mould to see if it was looking in the right direction. And then once I was certain that it was in the position I wanted it to be in, I cured it under the lamp. Okay, so once both of the eyes were ready, it was time to start brushing on my chameleon powders, which are also from Resin. I decided to make it really colourful and go through a whole range of colours. You can see 4 there, but that's just the beginning. I tried to get, you know, colours that went well together next to each other rather than doing it too randomly. And I'm afraid you can't really see what I'm doing, but I'm kind of going around the spiral of the shell in the different colours. And yeah, sorry you can't see very well. So once I'd finished with those colours, I got the blues and greens from my set. They're all in the same set, and I do love these chameleon powders. I will link to everything in the description. And yeah, I just carried on until the whole of the shell was covered. And so now I'll be able to show you what I did. There you go. That's with all the colours brushed on, and it's already looking good. I'm really happy with it at that stage, and I couldn't wait to get some black resin in there to see how it would be when it was finished. But anyway, I'm ahead of myself now. The next step was to clean up the mess that I'd made, and I'm just using some sticky tape just to remove the excess powder from filling the shell. It didn't have to be perfect because I'm going to be adding powder anyway. It's just going to be a different one. Right then, so for the body, my intention was to use the intense colour chameleon flakes for the body, and I wanted to use the fuchsia on the eyes. That's my favourite, so I wanted to get that down the tentacle area of the mould, but yeah, it wasn't going well. The static was just taking all the chameleon flakes off my brush before I could get them to the eyes. And yeah, I got the chameleon flakes everywhere. But actually, in the end, I didn't mind because it looked good having the fuchsia speckled around all over the place on the finished piece. So yeah, it wasn't my plan, but it worked. So that's good. Anyway, once I'd managed to do that, I went back to my chameleon powders, and this time I'm using the olive green just to paint the rest of the body, and that worked really nice. Okay, it's time for the resin, and I'm using Let's Resin's deep pour resin because I'm filling it all in one go. I do have the black epoxy from Let's Resin, but I thought it was a little bit too risky filling something so deep with that one. So I decided to go for my deep pour resin, and yeah, so I had to use some black mica powder in there to make it black, which is fine, it doesn't matter. And in case you're new to this technique, the reason I'm making my resin black is because the blackness of the resin really makes the chameleon powders, which are stuck to the mould, really stand out nicely. You could use white and keep more of a pastel effect, and that would also be beautiful. But I wanted to use black, and I'm using some Let's Resin black mica powder. Okay, so when it came to pouring in the resin, I just wanted to add a little bit and try and get it into the tentacles to make sure that those fine parts of the mould were filled. That's the trickiest part of the mould, really. You've just got to make sure you've got no air pockets in there. Do you see? Oh dear, pouring it all out of the mould, trying to look. Yeah, don't pour resin in your mould and then hold the mould upside down. It's not a good idea. Anyway, so I didn't want to squeeze them too much, the eye areas, because of the eyes that were in there. I didn't want to dislodge it. So yeah, if you're not putting eyes in, I would recommend pouring in a little bit of resin, giving the eye area a good squeeze to make sure there's no pockets of air trapped in there before you pour in the rest of your resin. And then once you've done that, it's just plain sailing. Just pour all the rest in and leave it to cure. I think I left mine about 2 or maybe even 3 days before I demoulded it. I know it seems like a long time, but I was thinking, yeah, deep pour resin is great for big volumes, but when there's something thin in there as well, I was worried, like at the tentacles, I wasn't sure whether it would be still bendy and it wouldn't cure as fast as the body part. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I was worried about. So I left it longer. I was really patient and I gave it plenty of time before demoulding it. So let's have a look, see how it turned out. I've got to tell you, I was so relieved when I saw his eyes, and he had 2 eyes facing in the right direction. And yeah, that was a big relief. You could still see the wires in there. If I wanted to, I could paint over the area where you can see the wires, but I don't actually mind it. And yeah, I love it. I love the texture of this mould. Look at those ridges on the shell. It's really realistic, isn't it, that texture? Absolutely gorgeous. And then on the body as well, it's got that texture too. Isn't it great? I absolutely love this mould, and I might have to make a friend for this snail because it might get lonely. Anyway, I decided I wanted to make a mushroom for him to sit on. Yep, a mushroom. Here is a fly-through of how I made my solar-powered mushroom lamp. First, I designed and cut the gills for my mushroom on my xTool F1. Once cut, painted and assembled, this forms the support for the resin to go on the top of the mushroom. On some kitchen foil, I made a round barrier with some 2-part silicone putty. I brushed it with some gold pigment powder and then it was time for the resin. I randomly poured in my epoxy resin from Let's Resin, pigmented with a range of mica powders also from Let's Resin. I temporarily covered my base with some strong tape to stop my bendy resin from flopping down through the gaps. I allowed my resin a little bit too long to cure, and as you can see, it's not very floppy, so I had to heat it up with my heat gun to make it bend over the supports. The next day, once it had become completely rigid in the shape of the mushroom base, it was time to glue it on with E6000 glue, just in the middle. Next, I took my string of solar-powered LED fairy lights and wound them around underneath the base of the mushroom. After I'd done that off camera, I used some hot melt glue around the edges to make sure everything was secure and then painted that gold. I also painted some of the silver foil brown as well, just around the edges. And then it was ready. I found an old tree trunk. It looks like a branch, it's actually an old tree trunk in my garden. Right at the end of the garden, it was a tree we'd cut down and it was waiting to go on the fire, and I thought it looked like it would make a perfect stem for my mushroom. And so that's what I used, and that just slotted into the middle. I secured the leftover wire down the back of the mushroom stem and it was ready to go in the garden. Do you want to see it in position? I couldn't wait. So here it is in a plant pot in my little seating area, so that at night time when it's dark we've got some light and it does look really good in the dark, but it's hard to show you it in the dark obviously because it's dark and my camera doesn't like photographing lights in the dark, but I will show you anyway the best that I can. Let's have a look. There it is. It looks nice, doesn't it? I really like it. So are you ready to see the snail with it? See if the snail likes it? Let's have a look. So as soon as I took my snail outside, it didn't want to go to the mushroom, it wanted to go and see the frogs. And yeah, it became acquainted with them, and then it was time to see the mushroom. He's having a think about it. Is he going to go? Is he not going to go? He's going to go. Yes. Let's see if he can get up to the top. Yes, he made it and he's loving it. He's got a good view of the garden from there. Do you know what? I can't believe how I managed to get the making of the snail and the making of the mushroom lamp all in one short video, but I did. I managed it. So there was a lot to pack in, but it was enjoyable. It was a really good project. In fact, that mushroom took a lot longer than the snail, but it was fun. So that's the end of the video. We've come to the end again, and yeah, that's it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do, and I will see you again next time. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.